I would not say that Georgians are like our founding fathers, like Thomas Jefferson. That they believe in balance of power and democracy, but they do believe that they're part of Europe.
What Putin accomplished in 10 years, Ivanishvili did it in a year and a half. So maybe it's a bit too late to draw any lessons.
It is a wholesale reorientation of Georgia from looking to the West to now aligning itself with the East.
This is a prime indication that we already joined the club of Belarus, Russia, Azerbaijan.
Basically, the Georgian dream has followed the Russian playbook in terms of means of repression and legislation in particular.
He talks with Azerbaijan, with Saudi Arabia, with or dictatorships, but not a single word about Bidzina, about Giorgi D. So why is that?
If you want to see a country that is genetically, instinctually pro-Western, pro-America, come to Georgia.
Hello and welcome to Talk Georgia, which is my English language podcast covering Georgian and regional politics. Talk Georgia is brought to you by Droeba Media Group, a trusted source of high-quality news and analysis. Also GSAC, a think tank providing comprehensive political analysis of Georgia and wider Black Sea region. Also academic and practical training for postgraduate students and mid-career professionals. To dive into the key developments of Georgian and regional politics, today we are joined by Mr. Ian Kelly, who is an American former statesman and a senior foreign service officer, who recently is an ambassador in residence at Northwestern University. Mr. Kelly served as U.S. ambassador to Georgia from 2015 to 2018. Before that, he was the U.S. ambassador to the OSCE. Prior to his ambassadorship, he held a variety of high-level roles at State Department, including serving as the department spokesperson. I think it was when Hillary Clinton was the Secretary of State. And he was director of Russian Affairs Office back in at the end of 2000s, if I'm not mistaken. Before beginning his career at the State Department, Mr. Kelly taught Russian at Columbia University, where he also received his doctorate in Slavic languages and literature. He worked in Russia during the Soviet times, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and he was tasked to set up US embassies across the former Soviet republics. So he's not just fluent in Russian, he also understands Russian history, culture, and politics of not only Russia, but the region, which makes him especially interesting as speaker for our podcast. So, Ambassador Kelly, thank you very much for joining Talk Georgia. Feel free to add anything to my short introduction, anything that you think might be important for our audience to know before we get down to business.
No, I think that was fine, Giorgi. Thank you very much for that very generous introduction.
Let's get started with the current political situation in Georgia, which a few days ago we had local elections that was widely boycotted by the part of the opposition. Most political leaders are in jail, and there is an ongoing crackdown on the opposition parties and civil society organizations, and also independent media. Over 70 political prisoners we have now, and yesterday there were 13 more arrested, so it makes them 83 or 85. There is a continuous protest going on Rustaveli Avenue for over 300 days. Again, a few days ago, on October the 4th, there was a massive rally, and that escalated with the attempt to storm the presidential palace. Again, as I mentioned, organizers were arrested and charged with attempted coup. My question to you is this. How do you interpret these developments? I mean, what does it signal about Georgia as a state? At what its stage of development, maybe is not the right word, degradation is it?
Yeah, well, again, Giorgi, thank you very much for having me on your podcast, and I very much look forward to a good conversation about these very dramatic developments, really in both our countries. But to start with Georgia, um, as you pointed out, I spent 3 years in Georgia. It was my last Foreign Service post, 2015 to 2018, and it wasn't my first trip to Georgia. I also came to Georgia in that period that you mentioned where I was helping set up the new embassies in the early 90s. But I think my most formative trip to Georgia in many ways was in 1976 as a
Ooh.
university student. I'd been studying Russian in Leningrad, and the youth tourist agency Sputnik uh, brought us American students down to Tbilisi, and it was a revelation. I don't think that's too strong a word. After 6 weeks of studying in a northern Russian industrial city, a very beautiful city, but also very industrial, where there was very little to buy in the stores, and where the Russians were very, very hesitant to have any contact with Americans. We go down to Tbilisi, and I've used this metaphor before, so I apologize to those who've heard this before. But in the movie Wizard of Oz, the first part in Kansas is in black and white, and then she goes to the wonderful world of Oz via a tornado, and everything's in Technicolor. And that's how I felt when we came in from the airport and were taken to the center of Tbilisi, and it just was a much more of a community feeling, a feeling of freedom. Georgians were not nervous to talk to us at all. There was many more fruits and vegetables that were available, and I had this revelation that the Soviet Union was not a monolith. That there were parts of the country, and we also went to the Baltic states, that had a much different attitude towards the kind of centralized, very repressive communist system. So to get back to your question, so what is going on now? I think the really surprising part of it for me, well, a couple of things. One is the scale of the repression. I don't think we have seen this really. There has always been a tendency, I think, with Georgian ruling parties to try and gather as many of the reins of power to itself. I think that was true, for the Saakashvili, and it was true for Shevardnadze. But what's very different about this is this dramatic change in Georgia's official orientation.
Yeah.
And the really very sharp, acerbic criticisms of the United States and of Europe. This is a country that I know, or a people that I know very deep inside feel themselves as part of the Western world. And to have the ruling regime now, to have them basically cut off all of the programs that we had especially
Mm-hmm.
security programs. We had Marine training programs. We had a U.S. Army training program. We had a big program to help the Georgian education system through the Millennium Challenge account. That's all gone. And in its place, we have a country or a government, I should say, which seems to have moved um, not to the west, but rapidly to the east.
Mm-hmm.
China, China and Russia in particular, and it just runs completely counter, I think, to uh, the aspirations of the
Mm-hmm.
Georgian people. I mean, you see polls that are as high as 80% support for the EU, 70% support for NATO. And so this government is is governing in a way that is counter, I think, to the uh, to what most Georgians want, and that is to become a Western country, not a uh, not a country that is has a centralized repressive form of government like Moscow and Beijing, but they are with it seems with every passing day are becoming more and more like these repressive, illiberal governments.
Uh, you served here again. It was started 10 years ago as an ambassador, and back then the same political power was in charge,
Yeah,
had led by Bidzina Ivanishvili, basically.
yeah.
Um, again, well, a lot of things changed, and now it is well very difficult to recognize. I mean, the Georgian dream then and Georgian dream now. This is two absolutely different things. Looking back, could you see any signs that this political force could evolve into this increasingly authoritarian, you know, political group that we see today? And what are the most striking
Yeah,
differences between Georgia then and Georgia now? And would you or could you have anticipated such a trajectory? Yeah, to update you, just one more thing. So it is like a few hours ago, the Georgian Dream Prime Minister basically attacked State Department. This is what he said. Um, he said that State Department needs to prove whether they are serving American people or the deep state. And the best way to do it is to recognize and condemn the Georgia's this attempted coup d'état. Okay, so yeah, this just for your information. It's
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
very new
Uh,
development here. But coming back
yeah,
to
I'm
yeah, and
not surprised. It's not the first time he has said some untruthful and slanderous things about the State Department and its representatives. Well, you're absolutely right. When I was there from 2015 to 2018, um, there was, as I said before, the Georgian government was asking for more cooperation with the United States, more cooperation with the European Union, and we had a a tremendous cooperation really with the government. I used to meet with Bidzina Ivanishvili. I'd say about 3 times a year, and we would have really interesting and productive conversations. And uh, I would express my concerns. One of my big
mm-hmm,
concerns when I was there was the pressure on Rustavi 2, which was the leading at that time, the leading
Hmm.
opposition voice or even anti-government voice. And so we had some pretty good debates over that. But the interesting thing was it, he did not move against Rustavi II, at least up until the time that I was there. Um, I also had a very different prime minister to work with.
Hmm.
In
Kvirikashvili was that time prime
yeah,
minister,
yeah,
wasn't he? Yeah.
Giorgi he was uh, extremely interested in building more connections with the West, especially with the United States Armed Forces. So we had the training program for the Marines who were
Mm.
going into Afghanistan with Georgian troops, and then we had a U.S. Army train and equip program too, called the Georgia Defense Readiness Program. The vice president came to Tbilisi. The Secretary of State came to Tbilisi. Kvirikashvili was invited twice to Washington, once under Obama and then once under Trump. So it was a very, very different relationship. And it seems to me that after Kvirikashvili was fired, there
By the
was
way,
a
so I hear that the one of the key reason why he was fired because of these intense contacts with the U.S. and Western allies. Bidzina
well,
got jealous about but anyway, just sorry interrupting you there. But please,
yeah,
please
yeah.
carry on.
I don't know if that's true, although I wouldn't be surprised. Uh, and I think it was after that that things really started to change in terms of in terms of our relationship with the government. But they didn't really become uh, the rhetoric in particular did not become really uh, downright offensive until
Hmm.
after the 2022 invasion of Ukraine.
Absolutely.
And I was taught as a spokesman never to speculate, but I'm no longer a spokesman for the U.S.
Yeah.
government, so I can speculate. It just seemed to me that after 2022 there was a real attitudinal change
Hmm.
uh, towards Russia and towards the West. It just seemed to me that they made a strategic decision. The government did, Georgian government,
Hmm.
to not necessarily appease Russia. I mean, that's a very pejorative term in English, appeasement, because of because of uh, the meeting in Munich,
Hmm.
in 1939. But they decided to accommodate Russia. They decided not to provoke Russia, and part of that was to distance themselves as much as they could away from the West. Not only the United States but also the
Hmm.
European Union. On top of that, again, this is speculation, but I believe that they calculated that if their real interest was staying in power,
Hmm.
they stood more to lose by trying to adhere to Western democratic standards. Um, and if they wanted to stay in power, it was much better to align themselves with with regimes like Moscow and Beijing. And so that I think is what's happening. A lot of people are concentrating on Russia, uh, but I think that the more significant relationship is the one with China now.
Hmm.
The signing of the strategic partnership, which I would never have imagined when I was there. Um, but they have a strategic partnership with with China. The one with the United States isn't
Hmm.
active at all.
Yeah,
Uh,
sadly. Yeah.
they they canceled the contract that had a U.S. Um, component to it to build the deep sea port at
Hmm.
Anaclea. There was a company called SSA Marine based in Seattle that was one of the members of the consortium. Now they've given that contract to a Chinese Singaporean company. So yeah, it is a wholesale reorientation of Georgia from looking to the west to now aligning itself with the east.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you that I have exactly the same feeling that in 2022, when Russia attacked Ukraine, basically Ivanishvili believed that they would take Kiev in 3 days or 5 days, as it was then stated, and he just surrendered. He gave up country to Russians, right? And what we see now, the policies that are produced since then, that's continuation of that decision. I believe. I mean, well, of course, it didn't happen that way. Ukraine resisted, the war continued. Also, the Georgian people resisted to that decision, actually, and it was not finalized quickly. It's still, there's struggle still going on Rustaveli Avenue, elsewhere. But I think that decision was that. So Ivanishvili decided that Russia was taking over the former Soviet kind of space, and there was no sense to just resist it. Yeah, this is my take on that. But let's move further and let's draw some parallels with Russia in terms of building authoritarianism. You served in Russia, okay, as I mentioned, in Soviet times, after collapse of Soviet Union. I think you were the director of Russian Affairs Office at State Department when Putin was consolidating his power, is early 2000, it was late 2000s and early 2010s. And what is your observation if you kind of compare what's been going on in Russia that time and what's going on now in Georgia? Do you see any similarities or differences? Any lessons to draw, or maybe it's too late because we are witnessing consolidation of authoritarianism at a, I mean, tremendous pace. Because what Putin accomplished in 10 years, Ivanishvili did it in a year and a half. So
Mhm.
maybe it's a bit too late to draw any lessons, or well, once we've drawn the lesson, then it is over already. But again, please tell us your views on that.
Well, I think you're exactly right. I think that you have to look at what has transpired in Georgia. And, if you're going to make a comparison with Russia, you have to look at it as an historian because basically, basically, the Georgian Dream has followed the Russian playbook in terms of means of repression and legislation in particular. But they've done it in an accelerated way. Uh, I mean, Putin didn't really start imposing a repressive um, legal regime and law enforcement regime until what that really until the early 2010s, especially after the massive protests of stealing the election in 2011 and 2012. So he did it in a much more incremental way. Um, you could see the Georgian Dream government when I was there, starting starting down the path to reception or repression in the same way that Putin started. Putin started with closing down independent television stations, and that, of course, is what the Georgian Dream government did with Rustavi too. more recently with
Tawari.
Mitvadi. Yeah. So they start with controlling the narrative for the country,
Mm-hmm.
both Putin and Ivanishvili. And then more recently, you've seen uh, the the
Law on
copying and
agents.
pasting. What's that?
The law on agents.
Right,
The
exactly.
foreign agents
Yeah, I
law
mean that's
that,
Russian law.
yeah, absolutely, right, what we
Yeah,
call Russian law,
yeah. I mean,
or
it's
Georgian
they'll
version.
say it's different.
Yeah,
They'll say it's like our Foreign Agents Registration Act,
yeah.
but it's not.
Obviously,
It's
that's absolutely
yeah,
different.
yeah. I
Yes.
mean, you have to register as a foreign agent if you are actually lobbying for certain
Mm-hmm.
legislation with Congress or certain executive actions, from the White House. Groups like Transparency International are not doing that. They're just advocating for civil society, and they're holding the government accountable. That is not, they are not acting on any foreign government's behalf. So, yeah, I mean, again, I think that the Georgian Dream government has made a strategic decision that they are going to join the Eurasian group of illiberal regimes, Belarus, Russia, China, uh, Hungary, Slovakia,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Um,
If you take a look at
so,
the election results, now I think we joined that club already because the local elections gave 80% to Georgian Dream, and the second biggest party is 6%. So, well, this is a prime indication that we already joined the club of Belarus, Russia, Azerbaijan, etc., etc.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you are 100% right there. Um, um, okay, let's move a little bit. Move to the American politics and also how Georgian Dream is trying to deal with the United States. As I mentioned, that 3 hours ago, Georgian Dream Prime Minister basically the attacked U.S. government.
Yeah,
I think it's not an attack. I would say it's an insult. I
yeah,
don't know, because
yeah,
it makes me sick when I hear these kind of stories about deep state and global war party, and
yeah,
these people that call themselves prime ministers and foreign minister, etc., and they seriously talk about whether the Trump is going to defeat deep state or the deep state is going to defeat Trump, and their policy would depend on that. But
yeah,
in reality, if we face reality, I think ruling Georgian Dream Party, and particularly Ivanishvili himself, deeply cares about what Washington will say or will do. And
I agree.
this is what we see. I mean, they are trying to mend ties with President Trump's camp. They're trying to lobby heavily against MEGOBARI Act in Senate and Congress.
Right.
They are sending these funny letters to Secretary Rubio and Trump administration, etc., to reset U.S.-Georgia relations from a clean slate. I mean, this is their favorite phrase: starting relations from a clean slate. How on earth you can do that? I mean, that's been going on for 30 years already. I mean, how can you start it from a clean slate? But anyway,
Right.
so my question to you is that, there is little response from Washington, or even no response from Washington to this attempts from Ivanishvili. So my question to you is, why is this happening? Because it's simply that the President Trump is busy with something bigger than Georgia, like Ukraine, Gaza, tariffs, the European Union, some domestic issues and politics that is boiling in the United States now, or Georgia is, I would say, too small or strategically unimportant for him, and or maybe it doesn't really fit his agenda. because his political agenda, I mean, again, the United States is actively present in Caucasus. For example, the Trump mediated the peace deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan. But that fit his political agenda to be a peacemaker, because, I mean, he wants to stop all the wars, and he's claiming that he stopped 8 wars. I don't know which war he means there, but okay, right? And then Russian-Ukrainian war turned out to be the difficult one. But anyway, my point is that because of unimportance of Georgia and its size, because of something else, busy with his own going-ons, because it doesn't really fit his political agenda, or maybe, as you mentioned, that now Georgian Dream is too closely associated with China and Russia and it's too toxic. Or maybe some other factors at play. What's your take on this? Why? Washington is when particularly Trump's administration, he doesn't really care about spreading democracy across the world. So he cares about interests, and he talks with Azerbaijan, with Saudi Arabia, with dictatorships, but not a single word about Bidzina, about Georgi D. So why is that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could devote an entire podcast, probably a
that.
series of podcasts about this. And you're right. There are you. I mean, you've touched on some of the factors, but let me talk first of all about the silence. And I have kept in close contact with my former colleagues at the State Department, and there has been not really a gag order, not permitting diplomats overseas to comment on internal political processes, but it has the effect of that. I mean, they are afraid. I mean, they're intimidated to say anything which is not specifically sanctioned, not specifically approved by the White House. So you will not see any comments necessarily. I was pleased to see a couple of things. One, I was pleased to see that the State Department did summon the Georgian ambassador into the State Department for a critical démarche. And then the State Department did go on the record about this slander from a Georgian Dream official in Parliament who claimed that the United States, via its embassy in Bangkok, was, what's that?
Yeah, Thailand. Bangkok.
Thailand, yeah. Was funding counter-revolutionaries and anti-Chinese activities in Georgia. What they were referring to was simply the method that we pay our valued Georgian employees, pay them their salaries or their pensions, and also pay for heating and electricity. And so the State Department did put out a statement about that. But those kinds of things are few and far between because of this.
So what makes things worse? It was not a member of parliament. It was head of State Security Service of Georgia. So
okay. I thought he was the head of the. Okay.
That was new head of State Security Service of Georgia. So, and this is what makes it kind of different. It was one of, if it were one of the MPs there, that would have been, I don't know, less troubling. But it was somebody who controls everything that comes and goes out of this country. So, sorry, interrupting once again. Yeah, but
no, that's
for your information, yeah.
Yeah, so that's one thing, and that has been very frustrating to us, who have never seen this kind of gag order, as we call it. Although again, you're not going to see an order saying you can't talk. It's just that people are too too afraid to talk because people are being fired for saying things that are not completely pro-administration.
Mm.
So you can imagine that people are not going to want to respond where normally they would. So that's one thing. I think that the other the reason you asked why is the Trump administration just seems so disinterested in Georgia. Um, I think that part of it. I mean, you touched on part of it. The president, when he was in Saudi Arabia a few months ago, said the days of us telling you how to run your country are over. And of course, that had a chilling effect too
Mm-hmm.
on on diplomats overseas who would normally comment on anti-democratic actions by the government. Now they feel they can't do it because the president has said the days are over when we will tell you how to run your country. So that's part of it. Um, and of course, the other part of it is, people talk about the America First
Mm-hmm.
foreign policy as being isolationist. It's not isolationist, but it is um, anti-interventionist in the sense that uh, we are we are not, or at least the policy of this White House is that we are not going to intervene in the internal politics of a country, um, and so that's what we're seeing. We're seeing it's more of a withdrawal, I think, from
Mm-hmm.
multilateralism. It's a withdrawal from NATO, obviously, and it's a withdrawal from a lot of programs of cooperation with foreign countries.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the biggest uh, thing they did was abolish USAID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, USAID had a huge program in Georgia, and it distresses me to a great degree to see that all of these programs have been shut down. Um, Also, as I said, we had very active cooperation between the Ministry of Defense and the Department of Defense. Now it's Department of War. And those programs are all gone too. And that's all part of this idea that America has to stop intervening, has to concentrate on defending the homeland. So foreign aid is out. Support for democracy overseas is out. Security cooperation
Mm-hmm.
with countries is out unless it has to do something with Israel or against China. So it's all part of this phenomenon of
Mm-hmm.
withdrawing to the homeland. It's not intended to be necessarily a signal to Georgia. Um, but you mentioned the MEGOBARI Act,
Mm-hmm.
and that is more representative. That bill and the support that it had in both the House
Mm-hmm.
and
Senate.
it's now in the Senate. They haven't voted on it in the Senate, but it has something like 80
Mm-hmm.
co-sponsors. So the U.S. Congress continues, I think, to be more supporting engagement, and it's so that Megabari Act is very much reflective uh, of the sentiment
Mm-hmm.
of the American people that we should be supporting countries that stood with us in Iraq and Afghanistan and want to join the West, um, but they can't bring it to a vote.
About the Megobari Act, as you said that again, it is not brought to the vote because now it is in a long line, of the bills that that failed to get passed quickly as a part of the other big bills and arrangements, and now they are in a queue or in a line, or it's kind of blocked or stopped there. And if it's adopted, what would that change? Because why is the Georgian dream so afraid or so much spending so much resources to oppose it and to stall it?
Yeah, so it's the technically it is being held up by one senator,
Mm-hmm.
a Republican senator from Oklahoma.
Yep.
But I suspect that he's doing it because he's been asked to do it by the White House, and I think the White House is against it because it will put pressure on the president to take action against Georgia, and I don't think the president, if he has been briefed on this, I'm not sure he has. He's probably saying, I have all sorts of problems in the world. Why should I take on the problems of Georgia? And if this bill does pass, there will be some pressure on him to act on it.
Mm-hmm.
And you asked about why is the Georgian Dream government lobbying against it? Well, a big part of it is accountability of
Mm-hmm.
human rights abusers and those who are taking the country into an anti-American direction. And so, of course, they know that they're going to be the ones who are sanctioned with this. If the MEGOBARI Act is enacted by Congress and then executed by the White House.
Okay, let's move a little bit, zoom out from the Georgian politics to more of an international politics. Let's take a look at bigger picture, the Russia-Ukraine regional dynamics. I mean, it's clear that the Russia-Ukraine war is no longer bilateral conflict. So it evolved into a broader geopolitical struggle, obviously, that again, European Union already increasingly sees Russia as a direct threat to European and global security. Also, I mean, Trump's earlier hopes for a deal with Putin is kind of fading, and his rhetoric is becoming tougher on Russia. And of course, I mean, the President Trump keeps distancing himself from this war, saying that it's not his war and it would never have happened if he was a president, etc. But at the same time, we see that he's more and more open to the idea to sell, let's say, strategic weapons, including long-range missiles, to Ukraine via NATO, via European Union. So my question to you is that, okay, how do you see that Russia-Ukraine war evolving, which way it is going, and, okay, particularly in terms of US-EU engagement, and how might the outcome can affect the region and Georgia as well?
Yeah, I think that attention where before there was attention and even I think ill-considered pressure put on one side to negotiate. You're right. I think that's all evaporated. I think that's only a good news. I think for those who want to support Ukrainian independence and sovereignty. But the attention now, I think, is concentrated on what kind of arms we should be providing Ukraine, and that's also good because we had in many ways, at least the vice president, J.D. Vance, had basically said, we're done. This is a European thing. It's not an American thing. Thankfully, the president has publicly said that Russia's not not negotiating with in a good faith way, and that Ukraine could win militarily. I mean, that was
Mm.
a huge change
Absolutely.
in the
Yeah.
president's attitude. So the focus now is on these long range weapons, and I think that that Trump is impressed with the approach that the Ukrainians have taken, taking out oil refineries in particular. Um, but of course, the range of weapons that they have now, these drones, is very limited, and all Russia has to do is move its refining capacity deeper
Hmm.
into Russia. So talk now is about the Tomahawk
Yeah.
cruise missile, which is one of the most potent conventional weapons that we have, potent and accurate. Uh, and then, of course, you've got the Taurus missile in Germany too.
Hmm.
But Germany isn't going to approve the Taurus missile until we approve a similar missile. So it really is on the White House to decide on this. The president was asked yesterday or the day before directly, "Are you going to allow transfer of these weapons to
Hmm.
Ukraine? Have you decided yet?" And he said, "Well, sort of,"
Yeah. But he said that
which
I
is
need
not
to
very.
ask how they're gonna use it or where they're
How are
gonna
they going
use
to
it. Yeah.
use it? Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, logically, that's a very easy question. They can say, "Oh, we're going to hit this
Hmm.
refinery, this." It could be settled in a day, but uh, a lot of us don't have a heck of a lot of faith in Donald Trump doing
Hmm.
something that Vladimir Putin would object to. Um, I hope I'm wrong. I hope he returns to the idea of peace through strength, which was Ronald
Hmm.
Reagan's motto, and that was in his campaign. That was in Trump's campaign too. But he needs to do something to show that he's serious about the Russian threat, and he really hasn't done it yet. Anyway, so it's very hard to predict how it's going to happen, but it is going to come down to will.
Hmm.
You know, which side is willing to stay in the fight the longest.
Okay, so let's come back to Georgia, and this is going to be the last question, unless you want to add something. Um, you are someone who basically both cares about Georgia and also has necessary, I would say, distance and to have a bird eye view over its perspective, because we all are here inside Georgia boiling, so and we don't really have this luxury of taking a look from a distance to what is happening in the country. So my question to you is that from that distance, what can be done internally and externally to prevent consolidation of authoritarianism in this country, which is again progressing in a really rapid pace? And how can efforts be coordinated, for example, let's say US, EU sanctions? We talked about MEGOBARI Act, but also strengthening civil resistance here inside the country and to unify democratic forces, which so far we failed to do. But again, we also realize that if we are not strong enough to resist this, the Georgia is becoming a Russian-style dictatorship, and this is what we see on the ground.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you said you mentioned unifying democratic forces. Uh, to me, I think that is what has to be uh, uh, addressed most urgently.
Mm-hmm.
The although you have a tremendous mass movement, the movement does not have a consensual leader really.
Mm-hmm.
Consensual in the sense that all the parties are saying, okay, we are behind this person or this group of persons. It is a it's an amorphous movement. It's a
Mm-hmm.
powerful, but it's a leaderless movement.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it's always been difficult. Even back in October of last year, they couldn't get behind one candidate.
Mm-hmm.
I personally think that the candidate should be Salome Zurabashvili, but they couldn't even get behind her. And that was a big flaw. And I think it's uh, one of the reasons why there was not the kind of election turnout that we saw in a place like Poland, where you had, a big turnout for the opposition.
Mm-hmm.
So that
Uh,
that needs to be addressed. I think that, and this is where um, the West can and should help. You should really focus uh, on new elections. And I know that that's a very difficult thing to do given the intransigence, the complete refusal of the Georgian Dream government to even talk about this
mm-hmm.
kind of thing. But I see that that's the only kind of peaceful democratic way out of this situation. And seen from afar, the situation is you have a government that is running the country um, basically in a direction that's not supported by the majority of
Mm-hmm.
Georgians. I would not say that Georgians are like our founding fathers, like Thomas Jefferson, that they believe in balance of power and democracy, but they do believe that they're part of Europe. They're of the West. I mean, we're part of Europe too. Our
Mm-hmm.
political system is European. Our culture is European. We are a much more diverse culture, obviously. Um, but the Georgian people have good instincts that is the way to prosperity, to peace and prosperity for them, and for sovereignty and independence. So, if you had one voice who could articulate all of these things, it would be much easier, I think, to rally support behind the idea of we need elections. Somebody should be saying no government should fear elections.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you know, you 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 don't have a multi-party parliament essentially. You
No,
can't
it's one
run a
party
government that
parliament,
way.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a one-party regime. It's not even a parliament. There's no
Mm-hmm.
debate really. So I mean, it's easy for me to say all these things. It's a tremendously difficult future you have in front of you. But I think that the key to all this is, as you say, unifying democratic forces. They're not unified now.
Yeah, Ambassador Kelly, yeah, I'm done with my questions. Thank you very much for joining me. Is there anything you would like to add to what we've been discussing so far before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I remember when I was in Tbilisi. I was ambassador. My last year there was under Donald Trump,
Mm-hmm.
and I would hear a lot of people in the United States who were expressing disappointment, that the United States was no longer a shining city on the hill. I said, if you want to see a country that is uh, genetically, instinctually pro-Western, pro-America, come to Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
So, back then in 2018, 2017, um, I, I saw Georgia as a reflexively pro-Western country. And that is the real difference between Georgia and countries further to the east. You know, you mentioned Azerbaijan, Central Asian countries. They're not reflexively pro-Western, pro-America. And that's the hope for the future for Georgia. But if you want to put Georgia on a sustainable path, you need to have new elections, and that's where all the energy and time should be devoted, I think.
Thank you, Ambassador Kelly, and thank you for watching us. Thank you for listening to us. Please subscribe to our new channel, and I'll see you next week.